The weathered old house stood silently at the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama. It wasn't grand by any stretch of the imagination, but it bore a sense of dignity, a sturdy reminder of the decades it had withstood and the man who built it. Samuel Shaw, a retired black veteran in his 70s, had poured his heart and soul into the home over the years. It was more than just four walls and a roof. It was a sanctuary, a living testament to a life of sacrifice, resilience, and love. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Samuel had returned to his home soil decades earlier after serving in the Vietnam War, bearing scars both visible and hidden. In the years since, he had worked tirelessly to build a life for himself. The house became his pride, a tangible symbol of perseverance. Over time, Samuel's family grew and moved away, leaving him with a quiet life filled with simple joys. The laughter of grandchildren during visits, the smell of biscuits wafting from the kitchen, and the warmth of a community that respected his contributions. One fateful winter, however, Samuel's life took a dark turn. A bout of illness sent him to the VA hospital for an extended stay. His absence was long enough to attract the attention of opportunists lurking in the shadows of society. A group of squatters moved into his beloved home under the cover of night. By the time Samuel was well enough to return, his sanctuary had been invaded. When he approached the front door, he noticed the curtains were drawn and an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. A sinking feeling hit him as he tried his key. It didn't work. Confused and alarmed, Samuel knocked on the door, only to be met with hostility. A woman opened it just enough to glare at him through the gap. "What do you want?" she demanded. "This is my house," Samuel said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "You have no right to be here," the woman scoffed. "Not anymore. This is our home now. You'd better leave before we call the cops." Samuel's heart raced. He was a man who had faced enemy fire in foreign lands, yet the audacity and cruelty of this moment left him speechless. He called the police, hoping for swift justice. When they arrived, he explained the situation, expecting the squatters to be removed immediately. But the reality was far more complicated. Alabama's squatter laws required a legal process to evict them, and the squatters knew how to manipulate the system. They claimed they had a verbal agreement with a landlord and presented forged documents. Over the weeks that followed, Samuel found himself in an agonizing limbo. He stayed in a motel, spending his days navigating a bureaucratic maze of legal filings and court appearances. His savings dwindled rapidly, and the emotional toll was devastating. Friends and neighbors offered support, but it was clear Samuel was fighting an uphill battle. The squatters, meanwhile, were unrepentant, showing no signs of leaving voluntarily. They trashed the property, throwing wild parties and leaving piles of garbage in the yard. News of Samuel's plight eventually made its way to local media outlets. A reporter for a community news station aired a segment about the retired veteran who had lost his home to squatters. The story sparked outrage among viewers. Comments flooded the station's social media pages, many expressing anger at the injustice and calling for action. One of those viewers was Marcus Shaw, Samuel's nephew. Marcus was a former Marine who had followed in his uncle's footsteps, serving in Afghanistan and Iraq. He had always admired Samuel for his strength, humility, and unwavering principles. When Marcus learned of what had happened, he was livid. He picked up the phone immediately. "Uncle Sam," Marcus said, his voice filled with both anger and determination, "we're going to fix this. I promise you." True to his word, Marcus arrived in Birmingham within days. He wasn't alone. Alongside him were several fellow veterans from his unit, all of whom had bonded with Marcus through years of service. These were men and women who had faced unimaginable hardships and emerged stronger for it. They shared an unspoken understanding that justice was worth fighting for, especially for one of their own. Marcus wasted no time. He started by meeting with Samuel's attorney, offering both financial and logistical support. Together, they crafted a plan to accelerate the legal process. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team began gathering evidence of the squatters' illegal activities. They set up surveillance cameras around the property, capturing footage of their behavior. They interviewed neighbors and collected witness statements, building a compelling case. But Marcus wasn't content to wait for the courts to act. He understood that the legal system moved at a glacial pace, while the squatters continued to destroy Samuel's home. So Marcus decided to confront them directly, but within the boundaries of the law. One crisp morning, he and his team arrived at the house, dressed in civilian clothing but exuding an unmistakable air of authority. They knocked on the door. When one of the squatters opened it, Marcus spoke calmly but firmly. "This ends today," he said. "You've stolen something that doesn't belong to you. You've disrespected a man who served this country. You have two choices: leave on your own or deal with the consequences." The squatter laughed, dismissing Marcus as just another powerless figure. But Marcus didn't back down. Over the next few days, he and his team maintained a constant presence outside the house. They organized peaceful demonstrations, holding signs that read, "Justice for Samuel," and "Veterans protect their own." Neighbors joined in, creating a powerful show of solidarity. The pressure worked. The squatters began to panic, realizing they were no match for a determined community. Their resolve crumbled further when local media covered the protests, painting them as villains in an increasingly public battle. Feeling cornered, they fled the house one night, leaving behind a trail of destruction. When Samuel walked back into his home, his heart broke at the sight. The walls were covered in graffiti, the furniture smashed, and the air thick with the stench of neglect. But he wasn't alone. Marcus and his team rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Over the next several weeks, they repaired the damage, repainting walls, replacing broken fixtures, and restoring the house to its former glory. The experience left Samuel deeply moved. He had fought many battles in his life, but this one reminded him of the power of community and the enduring bonds of brotherhood. His story became a beacon of hope, inspiring others to stand up against injustice. And Marcus? He returned to his own life, but not before sharing a quiet moment with his uncle on the front porch. "Thank you, Marcus," Samuel said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've done so much for me, Uncle Sam," Marcus replied. "It was my honor to do something for you." As the sun set that evening, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, Samuel realized that his home was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a testament to resilience, love, and the unwavering strength of those who refused to let injustice prevail. The days after Samuel Shaw reclaimed his home were bittersweet. He sat on the porch many evenings, staring at the yard that had once been a source of pride. Though his nephew Marcus and the team of veterans had worked miracles in restoring the structure, the emotional scars of the ordeal lingered. For Samuel, his house had always been a haven, a fortress of memories and peace. Yet now, it felt as though an invisible stain had been left behind, a mark of violation by people who cared nothing for his sacrifices or his dignity. But Samuel was not a man to wallow in despair. He had survived worse. He had trudged through jungles, endured sleepless nights with enemy fire echoing in his ears, and rebuilt himself after returning to a country that did not always value the color of his skin. This house, his labor of love, deserved the same determination. If it had been a sanctuary before, it would be one again, not just for him, but for others in the community. Determined to rebuild, Samuel poured his energy into making his home better than ever. The community, spurred by the strength they had witnessed during the fight against the squatters, rallied around him. Samuel organized a series of neighborhood workdays, inviting anyone who wanted to help. What began as a small group of volunteers soon grew into a bustling effort. People brought tools, paint, and supplies. They repaired the picket fence, landscaped the yard, and installed a garden bursting with vibrant flowers. Among the volunteers was a young woman named Tara, a social worker who had first heard of Samuel's ordeal on the news. Tara was moved by his resilience and saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who believed in giving back. She spent hours alongside Samuel, scraping old paint from the walls and replacing broken window panes. Their conversations flowed easily, and over time she learned more about his life. The struggles he had faced as a black man in America, the pride he took in his service, and the deep love he felt for his community. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in the garden, Tara said, "Mr. Shaw, have you ever thought about turning this place into something bigger? A community center, maybe? You have such a powerful story to share." Samuel paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "A community center?" he repeated, the idea taking root in his mind. "You know, I never thought about that before. But maybe you're onto something." The more he considered it, the more it made sense. His home had always been a gathering place for family and friends. Why not expand that vision? He could create a space where veterans, especially those from underserved backgrounds, could find resources, support, and camaraderie. It could also be a place for young people in the neighborhood to learn skills, share stories, and find mentorship. Inspired, Samuel set to work. He reached out to Marcus, whose network of veteran friends and local contacts proved invaluable. Together, they developed a plan to transform part of the property into a multi-purpose space. The garage was converted into a workshop where veterans could learn woodworking, welding, and other trades. The living room became a cozy meeting area, complete with shelves lined with books and photos from Samuel's life. The backyard was transformed into a community garden, where neighbors could grow vegetables and flowers together. Funding was a hurdle at first, but word of Samuel's vision spread quickly. A crowdfunding campaign spearheaded by Tara and Marcus drew contributions from people across the country. The story of the black veteran who had reclaimed his home and turned it into a community hub resonated deeply with supporters. Local businesses donated materials, and volunteers continued to offer their time and skills. As the months passed, the transformation of Samuel's home became a symbol of hope and resilience. On the day of the grand opening, the yard was filled with people, neighbors, veterans, and families who had come to celebrate. Samuel, dressed in his old military uniform, stood on the porch to address the crowd. "I've seen a lot in my life," he began, his voice steady and strong. "I've seen the worst of humanity, but I've also seen the best. And standing here today, surrounded by all of you, I know that the best will always win out. This place isn't just about me. It's about all of us, about building something together, about lifting each other up." The crowd erupted into applause, and Samuel smiled, his heart full. In that moment, the house no longer felt tainted. It was a beacon, a place where pain had been transformed into purpose. Months turned into years, and Samuel's home became a cornerstone of the neighborhood. The community center hosted workshops, counseling sessions, and mentorship programs. Veterans who had once felt isolated found a sense of belonging. Young people learned trades, discovered their potential, and built relationships with mentors who believed in them. One of those young people was Jamal, a 16-year-old who lived just a few blocks away. Jamal had been struggling in school and often found himself on the streets, tempted by the easy money and dangerous allure of local gangs. His single mother, exhausted from working 2 jobs, had heard about Samuel's center and encouraged him to check it out. At first, Jamal was skeptical. He shuffled into the workshop one afternoon, his hands stuffed into his hoodie pockets and his eyes scanning the room with guarded curiosity. Marcus happened to be leading a woodworking class that day. Spotting Jamal's hesitation, Marcus walked over and extended a hand. "Hey there," Marcus said with a warm smile. "You look like you could use a project. Want to give this a try?" Jamal shrugged, but he followed Marcus to the workbench. By the end of the afternoon, he had built a small wooden box, a modest achievement, but one that filled him with a sense of pride he hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few months, Jamal became a regular at the center. He learned not just woodworking, but also discipline, teamwork, and the value of persistence. One day, Jamal approached Samuel with a question that caught him off guard. "Mr. Shaw," he began hesitantly, "how did you keep going when everything seemed so hard? How did you not give up?" Samuel looked at the boy and saw himself at that age, unsure of his path but yearning for guidance. He placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "I didn't do it alone," Samuel said. "None of us can. I had people who believed in me, who helped me stand tall when I felt like falling. And now it's my turn to do that for you." Jamal nodded, his eyes shining with newfound determination. From that day forward, he threw himself into every opportunity the center offered. He graduated high school, enrolled in a vocational program, and eventually became one of the center's most dedicated mentors. Despite its success, Samuel's center wasn't without challenges. There were moments when funding ran low, or when bureaucratic red tape threatened to derail new initiatives. But Samuel faced these obstacles with the same grit that had carried him through his darkest days. Each time, the community rallied to his side, proving that the bonds they had forged were unbreakable. One particularly difficult year, a series of storms caused severe damage to the property. The roof leaked, the garden flooded, and the workshop was nearly destroyed. As Samuel surveyed the wreckage, he felt a pang of despair. But before he could even begin to formulate a plan, Marcus arrived with a group of volunteers. "Uncle Sam," Marcus said with a grin, "you didn't think we'd let you handle this alone, did you?" Together, they rebuilt. The storm became yet another chapter in the story of resilience that defined Samuel's home. By the time Samuel reached his 80s, the center had become a legacy. He often sat on the porch, watching children play in the yard and listening to the laughter and chatter of those who had found solace within his walls. Tara, now a close friend, often joined him, bringing updates on new programs and success stories. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel turned to her and said, "You know, I used to think this house was just mine. But it's not, is it? It belongs to everyone who's walked through those doors." Tara smiled. "You're right, Mr. Shaw, but it wouldn't have been possible without you." Samuel nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "Maybe not, but I'm glad it's here. I'm glad it's making a difference." And it was. Samuel's home, once a battleground for his own sense of justice, had become a place of healing, hope, and transformation. It stood as a reminder that even in the face of great adversity, something beautiful could emerge. As Samuel Shaw's community center grew, its influence began to ripple beyond the immediate neighborhood. The story of the house, once stolen and now restored to a beacon of hope, became a powerful narrative that resonated far and wide. News outlets occasionally revisited Samuel's story, highlighting the transformation and the lives being changed under his roof. The attention brought visitors from other cities, all eager to learn how they could replicate his model of community building in their own neighborhoods. One of those visitors was Gloria Martinez, a veteran advocate from Atlanta. Gloria had read about the center in a national magazine and felt compelled to meet Samuel in person. When she arrived, she was struck by the warmth and sense of purpose that radiated from the place. She spent an afternoon touring the facilities, speaking with volunteers, and listening to Samuel share his vision. "This is extraordinary, Mr. Shaw," Gloria said as they sat on the porch. "What you've built here is exactly what so many communities need. Have you ever thought about expanding, opening more centers like this in other cities?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Expanding had crossed his mind before, but he had always hesitated. The work it had taken to build this one center had been monumental, and Samuel wasn't sure he had the energy to replicate it elsewhere. Still, the idea of reaching more people intrigued him. "It's a good idea," Samuel admitted, "but it's not just about me. Something like this takes a village. It's about bringing people together and creating a sense of ownership. If it's going to work in other places, they'll need to build it themselves, with a little guidance, of course." Gloria nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're onto something. Maybe we can work together to create a toolkit, something communities can use to start their own centers. You could share your story, your methods, and your principles." The idea of creating a guide appealed to Samuel. Over the next few months, he and Gloria collaborated to design a comprehensive blueprint for community centers based on his model. They called it the Shaw Initiative, a name chosen to honor Samuel's legacy while emphasizing its purpose, empowering communities to take action. The toolkit included detailed steps for transforming homes or other spaces into multi-purpose centers, advice on building partnerships, and strategies for sustainable funding. It also emphasized inclusivity and community engagement, urging leaders to tailor their centers to the unique needs of their neighborhoods. To launch the initiative, Gloria and Samuel organized a series of workshops in cities across the South. Marcus and Tara joined them, sharing their experiences and offering practical guidance. The response was overwhelming. Local leaders, veterans, and community activists packed the workshops, eager to bring Samuel's vision to life in their own communities. Back in Birmingham, Samuel's Center continued to thrive. Over the years, it became not just a place for learning and growth, but also a sanctuary for healing. Veterans who had once been invisible to society found a sense of belonging there. Among them was Carl Thompson, a former soldier who had been living on the streets after struggling with PTSD. When he first arrived at the center, he was withdrawn and skeptical. Samuel recognized the pain in Carl's eyes, a pain he had seen in the mirror many times before. "Take your time," Samuel told Carl. "You don't have to say a word if you don't want to. Just know this, you're not alone." Carl began attending support groups and participating in the gardening program. Slowly but surely, he started to open up. He formed bonds with other veterans, sharing stories and finding comfort in their understanding. In time, Carl became one of the center's most dedicated volunteers, helping others who were walking the same difficult path he had once traveled. For Samuel, watching transformations like Carl's was the greatest reward. Each life touched by the center reaffirmed his belief in the power of community and the importance of creating spaces where people felt seen and valued. As the years went on, Samuel began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the center. His health was declining, and he knew it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of leaders. Marcus and Tara, along with a dedicated team of volunteers, took the reins, ensuring that Samuel's vision would endure. One summer evening, Samuel sat on his porch, gazing at the bustling activity in the yard. Children laughed as they played tag, their joy filling the air. Veterans and community members gathered around picnic tables, sharing food and conversation. The garden, now a lush tapestry of colors, swayed gently in the breeze. Tara joined him, handing him a glass of sweet tea. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice filled with admiration. Samuel nodded, a contented smile spreading across his face. "It is. It really is." In that moment, Samuel felt a profound sense of peace. His house, once a symbol of struggle, had become a source of light for so many. It was a reminder that even in the face of injustice and hardship, hope could prevail. And though he knew his time was drawing to a close, Samuel was comforted by the knowledge that his legacy would live on, not just in the walls of his home, but in the hearts of everyone it had touched. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us? What are your thoughts on squatters taking the veterans home? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.